Welcome to The Faithful Steward. This is a podcast all about sharing biblical wisdom and practical insights in order to help church leaders pursue and teach financial freedom as part of Christian discipleship. We believe this is a spiritual conversation, and this is a place where the church needs to lead the way in order to move our communities forward in how we steward God's resources. I'm your host, James Lenhoff, and I am so passionate about this conversation and helping leaders have the confidence to step into it. We believe that if we help people thrive financially and grow spiritually, it changes everything. And I am so excited to join you on this journey. This podcast is brought to you by Good Sense. If you'd like more information about what we're up to, you can go to our website at goodsensemovement.org. All right, let's get started with today's conversation. Well, as hard as it is to believe, we are coming to the end of 2024. It always feels like it goes so fast, and particularly the last part of the year as we cram in the last Christmas parties and we're buying the last presents and wrapping things, and everything feels chaotic and fast-moving and messy. I hope that as we finish out these next couple of weeks, you find places to breathe and just be. I hope for peace and just a stillness for you and your family. I wish you the merriest of Christmases. And I also hope that you find a chance to just take a breath and think. This is a great opportunity for us to review what this year has looked like, what it has meant to our family. As we come to the end of the year, we tend to reflect. As we look back on the year, sometimes we reflect and we judge ourselves. We highlight our failures, the things we didn't do, or the things we wish we had done differently or better. And that can be a really ugly thing. I think a lot of times it's why we avoid looking back, because we don't want to have to face some of that. For some of us, we may look back on this year and see the things we want to celebrate. And that's beautiful. The things that we are delighted in, the experiences we got to share, and that's a wonderful thing to engage in. But I want to encourage us as we close out the year to mix into that reflection our stewardship. How did we do? How did we engage in this journey towards faithful stewardship as a family? What did it look like for us? And let's take some time, whether it's before we close out the year and that kind of break between Christmas and New Year's, let's take some time and just think about and discuss together as a family what this has looked like in our stewardship journey. We believe at Good Sense that stewardship is a really important aspect of our discipleship, that this is not just a money management question. This is about our entirety of our life and how we think about all of our resources, that we don't own any of it. And so we want to take some time to acknowledge growth, to see where we have made strides, where things have gotten better, but also acknowledge some spaces maybe where we've gone backwards, where we've gotten more selfish or regressed into an ownership mindset and we feel entitled to things. These are the times where we get a break and we can just breathe and have an honest discussion about what we have accomplished this year, both the things we want to celebrate and the things we'd actually like to see different as we turn the page to the next calendar year. And so a lot of times if you do engage in a reflection on your finances, for example, you may look at things like your net worth. You may look at kind of just your overall spending, and you may just come to a general conclusion that we did okay. You know, if we look at our net worth and it went up, we may just kind of breeze past some of the deeper opportunities to grow. And so we do want to take that surface level evaluation. Did we build our credit card debt? Did that go up or did it go down? Because that will indicate some problems we need to address. Did our net worth grow? Are we saving in the ways that we said we would save? Are we spending with some intention rather than emotionally medicating? Those are all things we need to really take a good hard look at. But if we just start with, hey, our net worth went up, so we're probably good, or hey, we spent less than we made, so we're probably fine, we're not actually really challenging ourselves to grow in stewardship. Because you could be stuck in your stewardship journey. You could be stagnant in your relinquishing of ownership of all of these resources to God and still look pretty good on paper. You can still see growth in your net worth, even though you're actually spending recklessly and without any intentionality. You can see growth in your net worth, even though you are accumulating credit card debt because your assets grew faster than your debt did, right? We can end up hiding some of the things that we should be really paying attention to if we're only looking at some of those surface level questions. And so I want to encourage us to go deep. In this close of the year, I want us to be asking ourselves across all the aspects of stewardship, how did we do? What do we need to do differently as we prepare for next year? But what do we want to celebrate as well as we see growth through the course of 2024? So let's start with just where we began the year. What goals did you set? What were the things that were most important to you as a family? How'd you do? Let's pretend that we are having a conversation with ourselves in January of 24. What was that person telling you they hoped would be different at the end of this year, and where are you in that progress? That's a great way to think about that reflection, because we lose sight a lot of times of what we hoped this year would bring. And I'll find myself shifting my focus in the midst of the year as different obstacles get in my way or different curveballs get thrown at me. I'll forget what I had set out to accomplish at the beginning of the year. And so if you wrote down goals, if you established some targets, pull those back out and just have an honest reflection on how you did against those goals. If God were to come and ask you to give him an account for how you used his resources this year, would you be able to? And what would you say? And I would argue this is not just about your finances. How did you use his time? How did you use the gifts and the passions and the talents that he placed in you? How did you use all of his resources? Can you honestly assess that? Are you tracking things in a way that help you understand where stuff is going, where you're spending, where you're saving? If you don't have that information, then pull together what you do have and at least start to frame up some understanding, whether that's credit card statements, bank statements, bills. Start to build an awareness of what has been happening. This time of year, a lot of times you'll get a full year-end summary from your credit card statements or from your bank statements. They'll just give you, here's what the whole year looked like in large categories, big kind of nebulous categories. And that's at least a good place to start. It's not as granular and as detailed as we'd like to be, but at least we can get some sense of how some of these resources were directed. And we can ask ourselves how that feels. Does it feel right? Does it feel like we've overspent in certain areas? So this is a great time to just start pulling together what we have. If we haven't tracked it in detail, at least get some themes. And you probably already know. You probably already have a gut feeling that you have not used your time very well. Or you probably already have a sense that you missed some opportunities to serve through the year, or that you've overspent on things that you wish you hadn't spent on. Those are the things we want to press into, as uncomfortable as they might be. We want to challenge ourselves to look at the truth of how we use these resources that God gave us and really learn from it. Be curious. We don't need this to be about beating ourselves up or beating our spouse up or beating our kids up. We want this to be a conversation where everyone feels like we're just talking about reality rather than judging it. So let's talk about this financial conversation. What did we accomplish this year? Let's put numbers to the percentage of the income that you saved. Let's put numbers to the percentage of the debt that you paid down. Let's put numbers to the progress that you made on things that you set out to move toward at the beginning of the year. Are you hitting some of the general benchmarks? We like to see at least 10% of your income going to giving, 10% at least going to saving, and the other 80% going to spending, including your taxes and other costs that you might have. And so if you are at minimum in that 10, 10, 80 kind of category, you're in a place where at least you're moving towards stability and consistency. But if you're already there, which dials can we move? Where are we missing opportunities to be generous? Because we tell ourselves we don't have it, or maybe we're even telling ourselves we're giving enough. And so we'll just keep the difference. If you're finding yourself saving substantially more, are you tripping into security mindset and kind of this sense of hoarding in order to protect yourself? What does it look like to let go of some of that and start to prepare yourself to be more generous in the coming year? If we're seeing our credit card debt growing over the course of the year, that is a really, really important indicator that something is breaking, that we are either overspending because we're medicating emotion that we don't want to feel, or we're trying to keep up with the Joneses. We're spending money we don't have. It may also be an indicator that some of those main core costs are too high, that we're spending too much on our cars or on our house or on whatever the things are that are really big chunks of our spending. There's not enough left after those big costs are paid in order to cover the rest of our needs and wants. And so what needs to move? No judgment, no anger, no disappointment. Just ask the reality check questions of what is actually causing this credit card debt to build. And what would it take for us to move things around and free up the cash that we need in order to not continue to accumulate more debt? Some of those might be big changes, but we need to start to understand what needs to change, what could actually relieve that pressure, rather than continuing to try to contain and control something that may just simply be that our base costs are too high. There's no amount of reducing coffee or spending on pizza that's going to fix this problem. We might actually need to go down to one car. We might actually need to change our living situation. Those are really big questions that sometimes we don't want to ask because we don't want to actually do what it would require of us. We don't want to make the big changes. And so we'll continue to perpetuate the problems because we're not willing to face it head on. If you look back over the year and you've not really hit the targets that you set out, why? What happened? Did you set unrealistic goals to begin with? Were some of those things not really attainable? Or did you find yourself tripping into behavioral patterns that were perpetuating these problems? Or were you hit with some sort of blindside, unexpected pain? You lost a job, you had some really high expense that you didn't anticipate, and it threw you off. Give yourself grace for the things that are out of your control, but don't be afraid to challenge yourself for the stuff that is in your control. Face those things. Recognize the patterns that are putting you in this situation so that you can start to break those patterns and choose different behaviors. One great question to ask yourself as you look back over the years: would we have done anything differently if we had the chance? As we reflect on these things, are there obvious changes that we wish we could make? Whether that's, I wish I hadn't bought this car, or I wish I hadn't put in the pool, or I wish we hadn't spent so much on vacation, or I wish I hadn't bought so many presents at Christmas time. All of those are opportunities for us to ask the question, why did we make that decision in the moment? What was motivating that choice? And how do we get ahead of it? Because those patterns are going to come back around. Those opportunities are going to present themselves again. I would encourage you to look across the seasons. Do you see any patterns in the seasons? As you got started, were you more intentional about tracking your spending and having frequent conversations around your finances and how you're deploying God's resources together as a family or as a couple? Did you notice a drift in that discipline? For example, one of the reasons why I see people get really tight and really rigid and really focused on this at the beginning of the year is because they overspent at Christmas time. And New Year's resolutions and all the other things we say, we're going to, really get intentional and we're going to really force ourselves to have discipline. And then that loosens And then we hit it again when we've overspent for back to school, and we tighten back up, and then we loosen. If we can just get more intentional across the fullness of the year, then some of those crisis points stop being so scary because we've prepared better for them. This is also a great time to have a conversation with your spouse and with your kids where we ask the question around what they hoped would happen. We get our kids involved in that conversation, and did we hit some of those targets? One of the conversations that I've had with my kids in the past is about stewardship of time. I have the potential and the kind of the natural bent to be more in that workaholism problem where I will medicate some of my discomfort by just working and staying busy. And so one really scary question to ask my kids is, was I a good steward of my time? Did you notice that my presence was available, that I was moving at a pace that was sustainable? You can actually ask the people you love to tell you the truth around some of these things. Were there things you hoped we would do that we didn't do because I wasn't faithful in my stewardship? Were there things that I prioritized over our shared agreed upon goals because I got selfish? Those are really scary conversations to have with you and your spouse and your kids, to step into what they wished would happen. If you notice in that conversation that one of you tends to have hit all of their goals and a lot of the other people's goals got put to the side, that can be a really eye-opening discussion as you set goals for the next year. How do we balance these priorities across everybody's desire? Because if one of you is the money person, a lot of times that decision-making authority that they hold causes their goals to be hit and a lot of other goals to be forgotten about. And that is a really hard thing to face, and it can be a conversation that can get a little bit tense. But it is worth having that discussion in order to open our eyes to where some of these priorities get shoved underneath the rug, they get forgotten about, they fall down on the list, but they were really important to people who are really important to us. And so let's make sure that we evaluate how we did at balancing these trade-offs, at recognizing these priorities and making sure that when we agree that these are our priorities, we really do chase after them together. That we've aimed at a target that we've all decided is worth our effort, instead of shifting that target because somebody who's in the driver's seat decides to turn the wheel. This is an opportunity to confess mistakes that you've made, decisions that you can see overlooked other people's goals and hopes. This is a great opportunity to heal some of that if there's some tension and some ugliness between you, because there's no question that our priorities are hard to manage. When we have a family, our family is a family of 5. It is really hard to make sure that all 5 of us and all of our hopes and dreams and priorities are managed in a way where nobody gets lost. In fact, I would argue somebody's always getting lost. Maybe we make sure that their priority goes to the top of the list and we set them up for success in 2025. And so those are the kinds of conversations that can happen this time of year. And I would argue that they can be uncomfortable. They are reflections that put reality and truth in front of us. And I get that it's easy to want to avoid them. It's easy, particularly in the hustle and the craziness of the holiday season. It's easy to put those to the side. But when we talk next time about the coming year and preparing and setting goals and organizing our family to aim at more faithful stewardship, it is really hard to know how to do that if we've not done this reflection, if we've not looked back with honesty, if we've not unpacked this together in conversation and been curious enough to face what we need to learn, so that when we look at next year, we have those thoughts in mind and we actually make sure we make the changes that will help us move towards the goals that we're setting together. Don't miss this opportunity to reflect, to take a breath, to understand what's happened without beating yourself up or without judging yourself, but taking the gift of this shared experience so that you can apply the changes that need to be made as we turn towards 2025. I wish you all a very Merry Christmas. I hope you enjoy this time with your family, and I look forward to helping us all turn to 2025 with more confidence and more clarity in how we grow in this journey towards faithful stewardship. Well, thank you so much for listening to the Faithful Steward podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for links and other information that we mentioned in today's episode. Also, be sure to check out our website at goodsensemovement.org to get all the resources we offer churches to help equip them in teaching financial stewardship to their community. If you have any questions or any topics you want to make sure we cover on our show, you can email me at jameslenhoff@goodsensemovement.org. I'd love to hear from you.